I've been doing critical incident stress debriefing. I was trained actually right before September 11th happened, and then I was taken to New York to work with people there for about a week and a half right after September 11th. And we found through the research that was done there that it was very helpful to people, because what we did, we gave them a chance to talk about what had happened to them specifically, and gave them a chance to ask a lot of questions, and then we were able to provide them with resources so that if people needed more help, then we could refer them to individual practitioners and hospitals and so on. The key thing that we learned there was that the most important thing for people after going through a traumatic event like that was that they needed to get sleep. That was the number one healing modality. So they wanted to make sure that people were sleeping, and that we would give people some techniques to help them to sleep. But if they were not working for them, that they might need some medication short term so that they could get into that healing mode. The second thing that was most important was diet and nutrition, so that people would choose the most highly nutritious foods that they could during that time, because nutrition is very important for healing as well. I did my dissertation on resilience. I worked with children in a medical center for 10 years, the University of Colorado Medical Center, and I was a play therapist there. And I was struck by certain children over those years who were, we called them super copers. So when these children would come onto the ward, we would say, oh, we're so glad to see them again, because they not only did well with all the procedures and so on, they were also helpful to the other children. And the other children would seek them out for support. The key thing that I learned from my dissertation about those children was that they had really good social skills. So they were able to reach out to other people to get the support that they needed. Very often they didn't reach out to doctors because they had so many traumatic things happening with doctors, but they would reach out to the food service people, the housekeeping people, they would make friends with them, and they would make friends with other parents too, and also the children, other children. And that seemed to be the thing that was most important. And that's what's most important right now, is that people have a chance to connect with each other, just peers here helping each other. You're like a family here. And also to encourage people to reach out to their friends and family. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the normal reactions to this firestorm that happened. Because people wonder if they're going crazy. And the important message is that these are normal reactions to an abnormal situation. And this abnormal situation wasn't just a one-time event like September 11th. This was over many, many days, weeks. And it required, someone was telling me today, 10,000 firefighters to come here and help us. And also police officers and CAL FIRE people and PG&E people, all the unsung heroes, the neighbors that helped each other, the doctors, the nurses who evacuated people. It was just extensive. And this has been the biggest fire in the history of California since they've been keeping records. So it's going to take a really long time for repairs to take place. And I know that some people are thinking of even leaving Sonoma County, but we want people to stay, because as you can see by all the wonderful posters all over Sonoma Strong and all the wonderful sayings about how connected we really are. And I think that's one of the best things that's come out of this, is all the love. So much love and care and concern, and people working overtime. And meetings like this, town hall meetings, really help us share ways that we've coped ourselves, and that how we've coped in the past, to remember how did we cope with difficulties in the past, because Those are the skills that we'll use for the future, plus additional skills. Now today I brought a bunch of books here and some resources that would be helpful for people going forward. I did my dissertation on resilience and I continue to study resilience, so I'm a big collector of books. You should see my house. But this is a chance to just validate feelings. And by validating these feelings, we're decreasing trauma long term. So how people react to a stress like this depends on your personality. Some people are highly sensitive people, so they react very differently. Some people have had a lot of trauma in their life already, so this will impact them usually a lot more than someone who hasn't had to deal with huge traumas. The other thing is the duration of the suffering that they endured. Now for me, I was only evacuated, had 20 minutes to get out, but my house was saved. There were 10 days, I believe, that I was out, and just worrying and so on. But there are people who lost loved ones. There are people who lost their pets, their house, everything. They've lost everything, their cars. So of course, they're going to be impacted a lot more, and especially if they don't have a support system. So helping people get a support system together is really important. So the other one is also some people don't have access or they're afraid to access relief services. And so we're trying to make it so that people don't need to be afraid to seek help. I was told that there were a lot of people living at the beach because they were afraid to go to shelters for fear of deportation or something like that. So there'll be different stages that people will go through. Of course, the first stage is shock, disorientation. What's going on? Is this real? Is this a dream? Because it happened in the middle of the night. Is this a nightmare? What's going on? So there'll be a lot of surprising emotions that maybe people never felt before, including things like rage. Some people might not have a lot of strong anger reactions, but after this they may have extreme rage, confusion, shock, frustration, grief. There are many people that I've talked to doing these critical incident stress debriefings have survivor's guilt, that they got out unscathed. And then there's other people that they know and love who did not, but they really can't offer them much help. So there's a lot of survivor's guilt too. So the normal reaction to stress is fight, flight, and freeze. I was talking to a little boy the other day, and he said, I think I froze. He said he went to bed for 3 days and didn't want to come out. So he was really appreciative to understand, well, that's a normal reaction, that some people freeze from a shock like that, and it's okay. The adrenaline that happens to us in those first beginning stages is very helpful to us because it helps us to fight or flight and get out of there as fast as possible. But it also increases hypervigilance so that over time people might remain hypervigilant. And so there'll be different things that might trigger them into anxiety and worry. And that could be things like a car backfiring or seeing a fire somewhere in a fireplace even could be disturbing to people. So people have to be aware that everyone has different triggers that might set them off into a panic or increased anxiety. And that's normal to have that happen. But it's good to talk about it. Some people have a feeling of numbness. A person that I talked to yesterday said she feels like she dissociates, that she wanted help getting grounded. So I gave her some breathing techniques and things like that. There's a book here called The Emotional Freedom Technique, and it teaches people how to tap on acupressure points so that you can get back in your body again. Because that's a common thing that happens, you kind of leave your body. And because you do leave your body, it can affect your cognitive functions. So your cognitive functions can start slowing down, your memory can suffer, concentration will suffer. People have been telling me they're losing things, misplacing things, doing things, and then forgetting, where they put them or what they've done. So it affects you cognitively. Sometimes there's very strong thoughts and fears that enter their minds, and especially nightmares. There's been a lot of people suffering from nightmares, not just children, but adults as well. And that's normal. It can even affect your sense of self. So some people feel ashamed, and they're surprised that they feel ashamed for reacting the way they have. The most serious things are when people do dissociate and stay in that state of dissociation, and that's when I usually recommend that they get some counseling. And there are different counseling techniques that can be very helpful for the more serious depersonalization, deregulation, dissociation. And one of those techniques is called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And that's something that I've used with trauma victims, and very helpful because it makes the therapy go much, much faster. Another thing that can help and speed up therapy and counseling is hypnosis, so that sometimes I'll give people a relaxation CD so they can listen to that and sleep better and get into a more relaxed state a couple times a day. The physiological results of this kind of trauma, of course, are fatigue. And a lot of people are fatigued, but they can't sleep. So they're hyper-aroused and yet they're exhausted. That can lead to a lot of other physical problems. So that's why sleep is so important. And then, of course, body aches and pains, stomach aches, headaches, muscle aches, restlessness, anxiety, and it could even lead to a sense of paranoia. The fear can get that big, that people can become afraid of things they shouldn't be afraid of. Can have breathing problems, and of course, after this toxic air, a lot of people have been coming down with bronchitis, which is a very serious thing that needs to be taken care of, so it doesn't lead to other health problems. There's a desire to numb yourself from the pain and the suffering, and so people tend to overeat, use substances, so that people have to be really aware not to do that, to find other ways of coping that are healthier than using substances, including caffeine, because people are using a lot of caffeine to stay awake because they haven't been sleeping very good, but then you get into this vicious cycle. So trying to limit caffeine is very helpful. Rest. Take naps. You have permission to take naps if you can find the time. Or just even a 5-minute rest. That's why I like these books here. This is 5 good minutes in the evening, and then there's another one, 5 good minutes in the morning, too. So then that can have a lot of good tools that you can use quickly. Don't take all day. A good suggestion is not to make really big decisions at this time. And I know a lot of people do have to make really big decisions, but if you can put some big decisions off, please do that. At this time, we tend to be pretty impulsive, and we're not always thinking straight and considering everything. So it's important to put those big decisions off if you have the choice to do that. The other thing that's very, very helpful is to make sure that you keep your routines, that you keep your structures. That's why it's great that school's open again, so that students can have that structure of school. And hopefully most of the students are coming back by now. A lot of people suggest that people think in an optimistic way, but we have to be really careful not to have false optimism. Because I've heard people try and help other people say, everything's going to be okay, or we'll be back to normal soon. But that's not necessarily true. There's a new normal that we're going to be finding ourselves in now. But counseling, please tell students that counseling is available to them. I thought I could get a list of all the counselors like in Petaluma, but they just said to call the EAP line, and they'll set people up with a counselor. Other suggestions are to make sure that you try and find calm, a little period of calm each day. And if you can set up a little calm environment for yourself, that's why I love seeing the dogs out there. They are very soothing. And in fact, somebody sent me something this morning that they know that I have a cat, and that my cat's a big purring cat. And they talked about the health benefits of cats purring, so that it lowers your blood pressure, extends your life, all these wonderful things. And I'm sure that the dogs do much the same thing. I used to be a puppy raiser for Canine Companion, so I see the benefits of that program. Another important thing to remember is to breathe. So many people, including myself, especially during those days when we were evacuated, I just didn't breathe. I was just holding my breath all the time. So take time to breathe. Don't wait till you're in that place where you're sighing all the time. That's because you've been holding your breath too much. So try and find balance in your life if you can, just by having exercise, eating good food, and again, sleeping. Connect with your spiritual practices, religious practices. Use your churches if you're involved in churches. They've been very helpful during this time. There's additional help available through Sonoma County Mental Health. They have a hotline. The emergency hotline is 746-8181. And they also have Family, Youth, and Child Services. And I have some other numbers here too if people want to know. But some people will have serious reactions to this, where they might have even suicidal thoughts. So it's very important if someone says, oh, I wish I were dead, or I wish I died with my friend, or I wish I died with my pet, to take that very seriously, because people are impulsive when they're in this state, and they could possibly act on that. People should seek help if there's intense family conflicts, which do happen during a time like this, when people have different ways of coping, and they disagree on how to cope and what to do. So therapists are there to help people with those intense family conflicts and to move through them. Now, as doing these critical incident stress debriefings, a lot of positive things have come out of this already. And I just want to mention some of those. The generosity of others. The unsung heroes. I've heard so many stories of people risking their lives to help other people, putting out their fires in their houses, doing amazing things. The kindness of strangers. Some people talk about how their values have changed. Things that mattered to them before no longer matter so much now. Other things matter more. People are taking better care of themselves. And one child said to me, I can do hard things when times are scary. That's what he learned about himself, that he could do hard things when times were scary. And I thought that's a good lesson for us adults too. We can do hard things when times are scary. So it's important for us to focus on our strengths and support each other in that development of our strengths further. It's very difficult when something like this, I've never imagined anything like this ever happening here, and I'm sure most people didn't. I've always heard about the winds in Southern California, but we had those same winds here unexpectedly. There are films, there are books, there are all kinds of resources out there. So please have the opportunity to look at those things, those resources, and use those things. There are many good books about people who survived all kinds of horrible things. One good book is called All These Wonders, True Stories About Facing the Unknown. And it just talks about how people have coped in a healthy way. So any questions? How have people here coped? What's been most helpful to you? Anybody have anything that's been very good for you? The naps. So you give yourself permission to take a nap. Yeah. Because usually we don't give ourselves that permission, do we? Yeah. What else?
Try to eat healthier, like you were saying. Diet's really important.
Yes.
Especially with fatigue or lack of clarity, like eating really healthy foods has helped me.
Yeah.
Particularly the past couple of weeks.
Especially breakfast, eating healthy, yes. Start the day in a good way.
For me, two things. One, just kind of acknowledging when I feel like I'm having my own stress reaction, just be like, oh, that's what it is, and say hello to it. And then for me, just my kids and connecting with the people that I love the most. It's just
Yes.
making sure that I do that each day.
Yes. And I think that that's one of the most common things that people have said, how important their family is to them. And maybe they didn't always show it as much or connect as much, but they're doing it a lot more. And it is very healthy to do that. Anything else? Any other coping strategies? Maybe that you've used in the past? What's helped you before? So those are the basics. Drink water. Water has oxygen in it, and it's very helpful to the brain if you drink a lot of water. And it clears out all the toxins from all the smoke and the fire and so on too. Some people have been getting massages, doing yoga. I saw that you had the offering of yoga. I thought that was really good. Stretching. Anything else? Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to hang around here too if anyone wants to talk individually or learn more about other resources.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Eleanor Ratliff, and I teach fire technology here at the junior college. I've been here about, 3 or 4 semesters. It seems like a lot longer, but I've retired recently from Sonoma County Fire and had a career 27 years in emergency services and fire inspection and emergency response. So I've just been trying to share with the group and with my students the stories. There's so many stories, and we're going to hear so many more coming out. I live in Santa Rosa in the Montecito Hidden Valley neighborhood, so I was evacuated that night. And so some of the things that I personally went through, we just discussed. I mean, for days, I was achy and sore and tired. Those are normal reactions. Responders get those too. I've been on many, many critical incidents, and I ran our critical incident stress management program for the county. And so I've experienced these things before, and part of what we do for the responders is just acknowledge those things are normal and real, and hopefully they will pass soon. And the more we address it, the faster it passes. So I exhibited those critical incident stress feelings of fogginess, difficulty concentrating, and feeling like I couldn't really pull it together. And now the 3rd day back to school, I'm feeling stronger and that I'm pulling it together. And I think different folks, as we heard before, are going to take different lengths of time to do that, because we are distracted. We are still traumatized and hurting, and there's a lot to do. I evacuated my home early, and I want to share that story with you because it felt very conflicting to me to be evacuating early. But the more I've listened to the Sheriff Rob Giordano and other leadership, there's one thing that I want to stress to everybody is when we have a community disaster, what's needed next is enormous community cooperation. Cooperation before, during, and in the recovery phase. And that's not always easy to consider. And what does that mean? In the fire services, we talk about the 3 C's, and those are courage, compassion, and caring. And so sometimes it takes courage not just to fight the fire. Sometimes it takes courage to overcome an obstacle that you haven't faced before and how to cope with that. So when I evacuated that night, I knew the winds were bad. We all knew those winds were bad. I didn't know at the time those were some of the worst winds we've ever encountered, almost hurricane force winds. When I was with the county, I worked my turn as the duty chief for Sonoma County Fire, and anytime we had high winds, we would have fires somewhere in the county. We just didn't know where we were going to get it, but we knew we were going to get it somewhere. Never did we get it a bunch of somewheres all at once to this magnitude, obviously, as this is the worst disaster California's seen. And I didn't think we would be able to top the Cedar Fire and the Oakland Hills Fire and the Valley Fire. And I'm not happy that we did locally, but we did. And when I say top, I'm talking about the amount of destruction, the amount of people involved. So my story, I live right on the edge of the burn zone. The fire stopped 5 houses away from me. I feel very grateful for that. When I drove away, I thought I was not going to be coming back to my home, for sure. So back to the winds, about 11 o'clock I started preparing to gather up some things that were important to me and gather up my important documents, a few things that I couldn't replace. And several times I remembered things my father would say, and he said many times, it's just stuff. It's just stuff. I know that stuff's important to us. I have important stuff too. But that rang out in my mind many times that night. It's just stuff. So I loaded my car with the things I needed and a couple changes of clothes, and then I realized, oh shoot, I only grabbed jeans, and I work at the Public Safety Training Center from time to time, and they don't want us to wear jeans up there. So I was like, oh, I don't have the right clothes. But that's okay, it's just stuff. I'll get new clothes, right? So I loaded up my car, loaded up my dog. We still had power at my house. Did a few things to what we call harden my house to make it a little bit more safer. Make sure all the windows are closed, all the blinds are closed. I brought in my furniture cushions, and later somebody was like, why did you bother saving your cushions? And it wasn't that I was trying to save them. I was trying for them not to be little fire piles, you know, because we're going to get embers. And so I tried to get quickly everything out of the way that I could that might catch fire, catch my home on fire, and the neighbors and the neighbors and the neighbors, because that's what we saw. One led to many, right? So I threw all the dirty cushions in my dining room, and I locked up the door, and I was in my driveway, and I looked around, and I live in a condominium complex with 30 other units, and I looked around, and the place was still dark. And I said, oh, people aren't up. The phone calls hadn't, this was about 1 o'clock in the morning. While I was getting other people up, I got the call on my landline from the sheriff's department, and I recognized the voice. I was like, hey, Zach, but Zach didn't acknowledge me. He just kept talking, and it was a friend of mine who was the recorded voice. And so I was like, oh no, this is big, right? And I also knew that at that point in time, the fire was at Mark West and Reedley, which is only a couple miles from me as the crow flies. Embers can fly for miles, and especially in 60, 70, 80 mile an hour winds. So we were in danger at that point. I looked around, my neighborhood's dark, and I stopped what I was doing and I went door to door and woke folks up. As I woke folks up, other people started helping, and we had a notification tree happening. From my time in the fire services, you know, you hear about the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the family. We bond so tightly because we go through so many struggles together, and struggles are what bonds people. Joyous times and hard times. If you've played team sports, you've struggled together. And that may not be the greatest analogy, because a game's not as important as life, but there's shared struggles, and that's what bonds people. So we're a very tight community. And when I get back to big disaster calls for big cooperation, that's what I'm talking about, is shared struggles within the community. Many of my neighbors wanted to start the water. Let's water down our houses. Let's water down the landscape. And I said, please don't. We're going to draw down the water supply. They didn't think about that. How could one house draw down the water supply? Well, one house cannot. A couple thousand houses can. And in almost every place the firefighters did have low water pressure. So that hampers their efforts in using that resource where it's most needed. So we wanted to fight, but the courageous thing to do was to not fight that way, because we needed to understand that resource was needed elsewhere. It wasn't our resource, it's our community's resource. So don't turn the water on, right, at that time. Now this is just a place and time. This isn't for always or for every situation. But part of being courageous and being a community is trying to think of the big picture, not just my needs, right? The other thing that I wanted to do, I'm retired now, but I still know what to do, and I still had a radio, and I still have my safety gear, and I have a fire hose in my garage, right? I mean, there's things I know how to do. But what's necessary in a time like that is get everybody up and out and safe. We have a priority scheme in the fire services life, property, environment. We don't move on to property until we have life taken care of. That's why that night they weren't fighting fires, they were evacuating folks, because life is the first priority. If we want to try to help, sometimes the way we help in our community is get out of the way. So once I had everybody up in my small community, I decided to go. And I was one of the first cars that pulled out, and I felt guilty about that, right? But then I thought, no, this is what is needed of people in our community, not clog the roadways. So I pulled out about 2 in the morning. The fire hit my neighborhood, as it did Coffee Park, at about 3 in the morning. Embers were flying, and then things caught fire somewhere in that time frame, 2:30 to 3. And the roads were clogged, and we hear stories about citizens stopping traffic on Sinead Avenue, which runs through Montecito, so that people on Parker Hill can get out. And we remember the case studies from the Oakland fire where 20 victims died in their cars in roadblocks and in gridlock because there wasn't enough roadway to get out. And so the important thing for me to do was to get out of the way as soon as I can and make room on the roads for others. So I did that. I drove over to the County Emergency Operations Center. They were already up and running. And the woman who took my place that night was in command of the fire. And I said a short prayer for her and gave them a call and said, is there anything I can do to help? And at that point there wasn't, and so I evacuated out to West County. I listened to the radio all night long, and I have friends in dispatch, both Sheriff's Dispatch and Redcom Dispatch and Reach Dispatch, and I listened to the firefighters and the police officers on the radio, and it was truly heroic what some of those people were doing. It was truly heroic what neighbors were doing for each other. And you know, we've heard there's controversy, you know, sometimes, and oh, that's what they signed up for. I don't care what people signed up for. There are heroes among us in our community, and we're honoring those. And it's not just fire, and it's not just my fire family, but neighbors helping neighbors, people helping strangers. That's what caring and compassion is, and that's what we need for our community to heal. We've gone through a struggle together. We're going to continue to struggle together. And so having moments of joy and lightheartedness, allowing folks to talk about their stories. I've talked about the stories in my classes, but not everybody wants to talk in front of the class. I could talk all day long, right? I have an extremely huge word quota, but not everybody does. And so I found myself staying after class 30, 40, an hour to talk to 1 or 2 students. And I think when we do the training on peer support within the fire services, the first and foremost thing we do to support each other is we listen. And sometimes somebody might need to have that conversation many, many times. And maybe you're tired of having that same conversation, but we listen, right? We listen. That's what we do for the people that need our help. And it's part of the compassion and caring. So courage is difficult in this situation, and courage takes lots of different forms. And sometimes courage means sitting down and talking to somebody you've never met before. Maybe that feels uncomfortable at first, but asking somebody, how'd you fare? Are you guys doing okay? What happened? What's nice about that phrase, what happened to you, they can tell you as much as they want to tell you, right? But it gives them the opportunity to release those things. And those are going to come on and on for months. This tragedy, yeah, it burned a lot of stuff, but it affected a lot of lives, right? It affected a lot of people's senses of safety and security. That's traumatizing. It's traumatizing to everyone. A lot of the first responders are going through the counseling, and we're having critical incident debriefings, right? A lot of them can hold their head pretty high. They work 96 hours straight without very much sleep to do what they can to protect their community. We got responders from all over the state and from all over the nation coming in to help us, and that's huge. And some of the things that touch us, we don't even get. And in the fire service, we're very close, and I had a number of friends, but I also had a number of people that I just barely knew that were acquaintances that found out how to get a hold of me and texted me and said, I saw your house and it's safe. We didn't have phone communication for a few days, and I didn't know. And that was nice, right? I don't want them taking their time away from their dangerous job to go check on my house, but it was nice to get a text from somebody I hardly knew that said, hey, Eleanor, FYI, your house is good. Right? It was nice. It meant a lot to me. So that's my story. I have a map here of the Tubbs fire evacuation, some of the Santa Rosa early evacuations just from that initial night. If you have any questions or want to look at that, it's here. I'm working on getting some more maps. These maps are published daily by CAL FIRE and OES, so that every day the responders have fresh maps and we can brief each other. We have maps of the fires. This is the only map I have currently, and it's of the Tubbs fire. And that's the fire that impacted me, but we had the Atlas fire, we had the Nuns fire, and the Pocket fire, and our students and faculty and community were impacted by a lot of different things. So I'm sorry not to have everything yet. It's still really early. The Emergency Operations Center is still up and running. So I'm still working on folks to hand me down those old maps. I like looking at maps, and I want to get one of the entire county. I think it's important for students and faculty and staff to share their experiences. I lived here, right on the green and the pink line. A lot of people in the red, that's the burn zone. This is Coffey Park. But we were all affected, some more than others, right? Some more than others, but we were all affected, and we can all be part of the solution. When we talk about courage, compassion, and caring, we can remind ourselves that daily in small acts of kindness and in small acts of generosity, and whatever that takes. So, mass disaster calls for mass cooperation, and I like to say advanced citizenship. Right? It takes a little extra from those of us who have it to be courteous, to be not hyper-vigilant, but be heads up when we're driving. We've probably all made driving mistakes, and we're like, whoa, right? Because we're preoccupied, and so is everybody else. So use caution when driving. Follow the Sheriff's Department's instructions. Follow the Environmental Health Department's instructions on cleanup and cooperation, and work together, and be advanced citizens. I can answer questions. I got some information. What I have in my repertoire right now is 1 million snapshots. The big picture, the whole story could fill volumes and volumes of books. We've all seen the snapshots, but whatever questions you have, I am happy to discuss those things or comments you want to make.
I just love that term, advanced citizenship.
Thank you.
We need it for the long haul.
We are going to need it.
Yeah.
And that means a lot of things to me.
Yeah.
But primarily it means thinking of others.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I heard that all told, 5% of our housing stock is gone. Is that between?
I don't know
single-family
the exact numbers. It's about 8,000 structures. Not all of those are single-family dwellings.
That's what I heard too, for Santa Rosa. Santa Rosa.
Oh, for
Santa
City.
Rosa.
Yeah, I was wondering what confines that number was for, but that's.
In an already tight market, that's tough, right? And a very expensive market. And
I mean, housing is a huge issue for SRJC students, so it's just, I'm very anxious about
Yep.
that.
yeah, that's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
So I teach 4 or 5 different classes, and tonight's class is my hazardous materials incident command class, and I teach that at the Public Safety Training Center. And some things that we didn't realize, you know, with this kind of disaster, it's not just a fire, it's a medical aid, it's a rescue, it's a hazardous materials incident, and it takes a lot of different expertise. It's a law enforcement exercise. I mean, we've heard the rumors, we've heard about some arrests, we've seen some of the problems. Hopefully those pale in comparison to the good that comes out of our community with this. But there's a lot to this, and the recovery is going to be tough because the recovery is more bureaucratic than the response, right? When we're doing emergency response, I mean, it is planned and methodical, and there's ways to do it, but you all have seen the video too, and you know it's a lot of independent action on the fly based on, you know, training and other things, but there was a lot of improvising happening, obviously. As we move into the cleanup phase, it's much more deliberate, right? And it becomes more bureaucratic. And again, with that advanced citizenship, we want to just understand that bureaucracy is somewhat necessary. We need to make sure that the right people are getting access to the right property, right? We're not just opening it up for anybody to go clean up, right? Because there's still valuables there, and it's still, so we've got to make sure if you're going in to see your property, you in fact own that property, right? We also need to understand that in houses built in the 70s, there's a lot of asbestos hazards out there. There's a lot of ash hazards. Ash is kind of corrosive, and it will damage the paint on your cars, right? So that's something we can see. We can't see what it's doing into our lungs and things. So we need to be careful and be safe in the recovery. And that's a very deliberate and time-consuming process. So again, to that advanced citizenry is understand we're going to be frustrated through this. It's part of the accurate solution. It's part of how this has to work. And it's going to be a long process, and we need to make it a safe process. On 9/11, 343 firefighters were killed that day. Thousands were killed in the year to come because of environmental exposures suffered from the cleanup. So this cleanup is the real deal. We need to pay attention there about the hazardous materials and the risk associated with that. Also, you know, as we've struggled with re-entering and repopulating our neighborhoods and getting in there to check, people became frustrated with the roadblocks and with the limited access, but we still had open gas lines, we still had energized power lines, we still have lots and lots of dangerous situations that, you know, it takes time for folks to solve that. So be patient and understand it's going to be a process. It's pretty huge. One of the things I'm going to focus tonight on in my hazmat class is the number of fixed facilities or businesses that use hazardous materials that were incorporated in this fire. And the wineries use hazardous materials, and anybody with a forklift is going to have hazardous materials or propane, and anybody that is in an agriculture situation is going to have hazardous materials. So how do all those different things we may not have thought about still present hazards to our community and to our responders? So we're going to be talking about that a little bit tonight in my class. Is there any other comments or questions that I can help with, or anything I can clarify about the response? Or
I have a question. I live in Oakmont,
okay.
and I hike up and Annandale a lot there, so I met a hiker yesterday, and he said, oh, you don't have to worry about the ash because it just came from the forests. And I said, no, I think because there's wineries around here that burned and so on, that we should be concerned about the ash. Because some people are out there with their leaf blowers.
Yeah, I love my leaf blower, and I had to put it away for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any smoke is bad for you,
Okay.
right?
All right.
Because smoke, the products of combustion are certainly going to be whatever's burned. So if it's a furniture cushion, you're going to have chemicals and cyanide chemicals and synthetic chemicals. But if it's a tree, you're still going to have chemicals, right? They're more natural, but smoke is smoke and particulates are particulates. And so what we're really worried about is inhalation of the particulate and the toxins that come with that. Most of the fires are just about out, but those particulates like ash and dust and asbestos can become re-airborne. They're very small, and the most dangerous particulates are going to be the smallest ones that get deep down into your lungs, right? And so again, I mentioned asbestos earlier. Asbestos was used because it doesn't burn, right? And the problem with asbestos isn't necessarily that it is toxic, it's the shape of the fiber. It's a very long fiber, and it's small, very small, just a few microns, right? Our hair is about 100 microns. We don't get used to thinking about microns, but when we're talking about asbestos and different things, we're talking about much smaller than a piece of hair. So those particulates can get lodged down deep in our lungs, and that's what can cause the problem. And so if people have respiratory situations, definitely stay out of the area as much as possible. Use the N95 mask, which are better than nothing, but still not perfect, right? Because those particulates get in our hair, they get in our clothes. We take off the mask and they're still there, right? So in hazmat and in fire, we go through a decontamination process. When I was given access back to my house, one of the first things I did was I hosed down all my window screens because I like to have windows open, right? So I cleaned my screens, I cleaned my house. I had a lot of soot and dust and stuff in my house. I cleaned that pretty well. When we get some rains, that will help. You know, that'll help clear the air a little bit. The cleanup is beginning to happen. That needs to be very methodical. That's going to frustrate folks. That needs to happen in a very careful and methodical way. Hopefully quick, but careful.
I just want to say thank you. I know you're an incredible resource for fire technology students, and
Thank you.
not many people maybe know that about you or what you offer, but I'm sorry that we had this fire that we now need to call on you, but I'm so grateful that you're part of our SRJC Petaluma community.
Thank you, and I'm so proud to be a part of this organization, and the junior college has been so great to our community, and really kind of risen up. I understand there's something happening Saturday at Bailey Field at the Santa Rosa campus. Really kind of rising up to be community leaders, and that's what we need is good, strong leadership, and to understand that in the midst of all this pain and sorrow, it's okay to have moments of joy, and it's important to do that, right? And it's important to help each other. And I think for me personally, there's nothing that feels better to me than when I've truly helped somebody. And if we can all kind of remember that, if we're looking for a good time, go help somebody, right? Go help somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
For our students, talk about a few resources they may be able to utilize in the fire recovery period. So I'll have Tony Album come up and talk about our resource guide.
Hey everyone, so my name is Tony. I'm the coordinator of the Student Resource Center here in Petaluma, and in order to really best and most conveniently serve our students, we've put together a resource guide sort of combining all of the resources available within the community and here in Petaluma and in Santa Rosa on campus. So these guides, they look much like this. They are available. We have 3 tables around campus. One is here in the library and outside the reading room. Another one's over in Rotary Plaza, and then we have a 3rd table at the call building. So our guides are there. We have calendars with all of our activities this week, as well as a variety of other resources and handouts that we've put together. The guides are pretty useful. They are divided into a few different sections. We've got health and well-being, which really has all the mental health support services that we've heard about. The Anthems offer of mental counseling is in here. We have towels available at the Cyber Center, so if you don't have access to a shower, we have towels available. The Resource Center is fully stocked with soap and other toiletries that you might need. You can swing by anytime and check those out. It's available for students and their immediate family as well as faculty and staff. We also have housing resources. The main housing resource right now from the JC is our off-campus housing website. We are working on getting that updated so that all of our rentals are current, and we also have specific rentals that are for fire relief victims, and you will see in the comments it says fire relief, and those often are free. They're temporary housing for victims of the fire, so we really want our students to be able to use that. We also have a transportation section. If your transportation has changed or if you need transportation, it provides information on car sharing, on biking, on using the train, the schedules. We also have parking here is free through the 28th, so we really want that to be available to students, something they don't have to worry about. If you need to replace your parking permit, if that was lost, you can do that here in Petaluma at our First Stop Center. And quick reminder, if you have your validated student ID, transportation is free on the Petaluma Transit System, the Sonoma County Transit System, and the Santa Rosa Bus System. So get your photo ID, get it validated, because those are great resources to use to get around. And our final page is full of just food assistance. So if you need food in the immediate upcoming weeks, there's lots of different places you can get it. Here on campus, we have food, free food available 11 to 1. Bring a grocery bag. It is supplied by the Redwood Empire Food Bank, and they bring us food each week. So take as much as you need for a week for your family, and grab some more the next week.
Excellent, thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Morrison. I'm the coordinator of Our House Intercultural Center, Jacobs 116. We've been sort of available as always, but at an even more heightened level for a comfort zone, really. Sometimes I refer to it, Our House, as the living room of campus, or a living room of campus, where students feel comfortable and can find comfort and can find friendship and friendly faces, as well as we've been offering a lot of snacks and food all week, and we'll continue into next week. Even if you're not directly affected by the fire in the sense of losing property, we're all affected psychologically and are all seeking comfort in this kind of social outlet. So please feel free to come into Our House. We're open from 10 to 7, Monday through Thursday, and we'll stay open this Friday also from 10 to about 4 or 5. And then the Student Success Team, led by my colleague Byron Reeves, is also located in Our House, and they're organizing. They are always running helpful workshops for students throughout the year to help students, do their best and succeed in their classes, and things like time management skills and midterm study sessions. So this week, tomorrow, Thursday, from 12 to 2, they are the hosts of our next. It's sort of a combined town hall as well as midterm jams, entertainment, live music, just to lift our spirits, as well as free barbecue. Free food is a theme we're offering. That seems to come up as something comforting. So that'll be out in, Rotary Plaza, here on campus tomorrow, 12 to 2, and that'll be a chance for us to come together and break bread and find comfort.